Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back live on Be Honest with Dr. Yana. In today's episode, we are uncovering the chilling reality of what it's like to cross paths with a psychopath. For those who've encountered one up close, the experience can be both mesmerizing and also terrifying. What does it really feel like to be in the presence of someone who lacks empathy and can manipulate with surgical precision? And how do you recognize the signs before it's too late? Stay with us as we discuss it with our special guest, Dr. Sally Adnams Jones. She is an author and artist, expressive art therapist, transformative educator, and she lives in Vancouver Island, Canada. Let's welcome our beautiful guest. Hello, Sally.
Hi, Yana. It's really good to be with you and listeners. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful to you for showing up today to tell your incredible story.
Thanks, Yana. It's a story that's lived with me for a while, and I really believe that I need to share this. I'm ready. I've done the work. I'm recovered. I've done the research, and now I'm ready to really put this out there to help other.
I know that you were married for 30 years before having this experience with this psychopathic person, and with a psychopath that was a diagnosed psychopath, not just what we would commonly call, or he's psychopathic or she's psychopathic. That was a real diagnosis.
Yeah, so we need to be really careful about diagnosing people, and it's in the language all the time. You're a narcissist, you're a sociopath. The encounter I had was literally a diagnosed psychopath, and I can tell your list how that came about. But yeah, you mentioned I was married for 30 years, and I can look back and notice how I was set up to actually then go on to have a relationship with a psychopath. So in my 30-year marriage, I was very young when I met him. I was 19. I didn't have any experience and was madly in love with this very high status individual, very accomplished, highly intelligent. I'm not going to say he's a psychopath. I don't think he is, actually, because now I know the difference between narcissistic personality disorder. I know the difference between that and borderline personality disorder and sociopathy and psychopathy. They're different, but they're all under the cluster B personality disorder in the DSM-5. So I can distinguish now because I've had to do a lot of work on this. Plus, I'm a therapist, so I deal with this with clients. So I will not say that my first relationship, 30 years with a fellow, he's not a psychopath, but there were traits in the relationship which later set up to find some personality disorder as normal, which I was innocent about. So let's say the 30-year marriage, there's a huge power differential. The person I married was a public figure that everybody loved. He was a very successful person in his career, and I was the one that was didn't even come up in conversation. I'll say expected to be the one at home who took care of everything else and raised the kids, and slowly but surely became treated like a servant, was demeaned, and I would say verbally sort of dismissed often. So I began to tolerate a level of low self-esteem within myself in order to maintain the family and my children and a home and the white picket fence. So slowly but surely, I think my self-esteem eroded over the 30 years. And I normalized the relationship really between somebody with all the power and somebody who had to be flexible and tolerate bad behavior. So I did choose to leave that marriage. I was noticing that this is actually abuse, and I was beginning to learn about abuse for the first time, that I had normalized emotional and financial abuse. And interestingly enough, which is ongoing in many ways. But I don't want to talk about that so much, because that just set me up for an even worse situation when I started dating again. After leaving that marriage, I was fairly naive, still unable to recognize the signs of psychopathy, and was totally unprepared for recognizing I now call evil. And I'm careful with what I call evil. There's specific traits.
And like most of us, Sally, like most of us, we don't go out of our house every day expecting to meet a psychopath.
There's no training. There's no training ground until you meet one. And then usually you only understand it once you've been completely annihilated. And by then so we can talk about that story, and just to say that, of course, there was a gap between my marriage and starting to date again, and I was alone. And so I think what also set me up was, by then I was feeling quite lonely again, and I'm a romantic at heart. I always give people the benefit of the doubt. My marriage set me up to be a bit codependent, so I own some of the features that set me up for an unbelievable experience.
And that is how most of us, after the divorce, this is how we venture into the world of dating, not particularly equipped with all of the recognition signs and understanding the red flags. So we just dive in.
Yeah, no, you as a woman have been groomed from day one, groomed by your parents, groomed by your church, groomed by your schooling to be a nice person. So what is a nice person? Generally taught to be kind. They're taught to never say no. They don't have good boundaries. They're compliant. They're agreeable. They're tend to have their voice silenced quite a lot. So don't speak a lot, because that's not your place. You're raised to be a nice girl is to be seen and not heard. So the woman's journey is to reverse all that grooming to stay safe. None of that grooming sets you up to be safe as a woman in this predatory world. So I had to unlearn my whole training from my parents, who were good people and thought girls should be, from the church that actually abandoned because women were to be seen and heard and to be good. And so I was really figuring out, what does good mean? It certainly doesn't mean not able to recognize evil or have good boundaries. And to be able to speak up and advocate, which is what I'm doing now, advocate women and re-educate women in particular. So I just want to also add that psychopathy is not only men predating women. Women can also be psychopaths, but we can go into the stats. There are far fewer psychopathic women, and there's reasons for that. So yeah, I'm now trying to bring forth this awareness of women need to boundary up. Women need to be educated on the signs of psychopathy and know how to protect themselves.
You mentioned that there are much fewer women than men psychopaths. What is the difference?
Yeah, so the one thing to note is psychopaths are not going to offer themselves for some kind of testing. So it's difficult to get stats. They won't even go to a therapy office. So how academics get the stats, that could be questionable. However, what they've come up with so far is that 6% of all human males are psychopaths. That's a lot. 3% of all females are psychopaths, and 20% of CEOs, high status men such as lawyers and doctors, academics, 20% are psychopaths. So they accumulate in these high power, high status jobs deliberately, and they function really well there. They are the ones that have no empathy, no remorse, know how to manipulate, gather resources, treat people and entire environment as an object, as opposed to understanding any sentience in anybody else. So they rise to the top cream, and they do really well. And I have no doubt that our world run by psychopathy. We had in presidents, CEOs of big businesses. So they have the power to only use you, but if you recognize behavior, they have the power to use all their resources to punish you as well. So this is why a lot of women can't leave, sadly, is that the power imbalance means that if they dare to leave, they know what's going to come. They don't have the resources to fight it legally. They know that often if it's a marriage, that there will be deliberate parental alienation. They'll have their children taken from them. They'll have all their resources stripped, and they'll have to fight for those, and they've got no money to do that. So it's never cut and dried to say women are stupid, why do they stay? And that's one of the things I'm really clear about is psychopaths choose women deliberately who are either a trophy wife or really smart, because that gets them off as well. Oh my goodness, if I can conceive cunningly someone smart, that reflects on me. That means I'm really smart. So there's put the myth to bed that women who fall for this trap are stupid. They're not. And the psychopath I'm involved with chose 50 women. Of the 50 women, I have met 5, all of whom are brilliant, bright, beautiful, smart women, some of whom were lawyers and doctors. So that's a myth. And I want to make that really clear, that it's the power imbalance and the kind hearts of women that get abused.
So the psychopaths, they specifically choose women that are of the higher economic status, higher IQs, and for them, it is just a thrill to be able to subdue women like that.
Totally, Yana. So now we're talking about predators who use romance fraud specifically. So if they've risen to the top of like cream to the top in the business, they might choose different women. Actually, they might choose the trophy wives. The less successful psychopathic predator predating women, they go for the ones with some accomplishment, deliberately, high IQ, because that means that they might have some finances. So they're actually looking for money and sex, and they exploit a whole, we'll talk about that, how they do it. But they target smart women. They're not going to go for somebody who's got no assets and who hasn't accomplished anything. The problem has been that in the legal system, it's mostly been male lawyers and male judges up till recently who've tried these cases when the women finally bring a predator to court. And the women are dismissed as stupid and vacuous and don't have any at all from the legal system. So the predators have been treated as if they're part of the bro code. Oh well, you got too bad. He's going to get 12 months for stealing all your assets. Because one thing I realized, not illegal to lie. I didn't know that. So you don't get a picture for lying. You have to do things. We'll talk about that. Anyways, just say the legal system is now changing. It's now female lawyers, female prosecutors, female judges, and they are doing their best to change this system. And that's the focus of my new book, is how we're working to change and protect women. Change this. It's not a stupid woman, smart man situation at all. It's a predator victim situation, and it's usually smart, bright, loving, kind women.
And I'm so glad that you're writing this book, because we all need to read that. We all need to hear the stories, because being vulnerable in this psychopathic world is horrifying. And we can talk about our experiences, like being very composed, as you are right now talking about it. But nevertheless, we go through that experience, and then we talk about it after the fact that it's been probably 13 years since then.
Yeah. So it was 13 years ago that I had my experience, and I was with that psychopath for 9 months before I realized what I was dealing with, and before I got a private detective to check the facts, and then went to the police. And the police asked me to cooperate with them to put this person back in prison, which we did. So he was tried, and he went to prison for what he did to me, which was construct a fake personality, was all lies, a fake constructed identity. He constructed a story that would suit my personality. So I'm an academic. He pretended to be an academic. He faked a well-off background. He faked why he was in town. We spoke naturally and fluidly about academic life, cycles, research. He had all which that he'd researched. There was zero pressure for me to lend him any money. But what happened was he began to get into my affections by saying, oh, your son is about to graduate. That's amazing. What's he going to do? So it was just chatty conversations. And I said, we don't know. We'll see. And he said, well, the weird thing is, I've got this business opportunity and I don't have anyone to run it. I have an opportunity for franchise. A really wealthy client of mine, this fellow claimed to be an professor who advised people on investment. He said, I had a lawyer. I gave him some investment advice, and he scored a lot of money. And he said he's got franchise opportunity that he can't use. Maybe I could use it. So we investigated that, and he was setting me up money on my son's behalf. So he took us to the building. He showed us where the franchise being created. He had conversations with my son. My son was excited. He showed us all the legal document work that was fraudulent from this major company that is across the US and Canada. And we were amazed. What an opportunity. My son was so excited. How could a mother resist?
Absolutely.
Luckily, I did. But other women were not so lucky. There's a doctor who went into business with him for $250,000. There was a lawyer. He pretended he was a criminal lawyer academic. He could speak language with the lawyer girlfriend, medical language. He even pretended to be a pediatric cardiologist, and he would, with the other women that have been really privileged to meet and really do healing work with online. The way he defrauded us was the brilliance of his constructions, of the facility he had with language to speak that language, to fake meetings on the phone, to when he was a cardiologist with one client, did a minor surgery on her child. You've never met people like this who can be so chameleon and emulate empathy when there's literally zero empathy. You're only being used. And there's cunning. They're all very high IQ, low EQ. So high intelligence, low emotional resonance, but they can pretend to have emotional resonance, and they suck you in, and they don't pressurize you. They make you feel very safe and comfortable. They meet kids, and then they kind of pretend they're family. They take their time. They're very cunning. They pretend to serve you and support you and do whatever you would imagine would be a fake future with them.
And they're very charming.
Very, very charming, humorous. My psychopath was hilarious. He was charming and humble. I've testified in his trial recently because he's been tried again by 4 women. He's a serial predator, and that's the one thing I kept emphasizing is the danger of a predator is the multiple faces they can present and make them context relevant. So if they're with you, they're one thing. If they're with somebody else, they're another thing. And they're completely mirroring your needs. Whatever you need, they will give that to you. So that's how they suck you in. And each of the women I've spoken to felt that her personal needs were met. And they were seduced in that way into feeling safe. And then open-heartedly offered him some kind of finance to help him.
When was the moment when you finally understood that something is wrong?
Yeah, I'll never forget that moment, Yana. And you and I have spoken about the trauma that ensues. That was the moment my trauma occurred, and that has lived in my body ever since. And so I have autoimmune dysfunction because I received a phone call while he was sitting next to me on the sofa. We were just watching TV. I got a phone call, and it was my brother-in-law who had been dealing with the private detective. And my brother-in-law said to me, "Sally, is he there?" And I said, "Yeah, he's here." He said, "Get him out of the house now." Like, that trauma lives in my body and has lived on ever since. So my brother-in-law was telling me on the phone, "We've done all the work. The private detective has discovered who he really is. He's not who he says he is. Get him out of the house right now. We don't know if he's violent. You're in deep danger." And I was walking away from psychopath so that I could hear the conversation. My brother-in-law was saying, "Don't answer me in front of him with any information." No. So I was saying loudly, "Oh, is my sister sick?" And my brother was saying, he's a psychopath, you've got him out." And the psychopath following me, they have a sixth sense.
They do. Mm-hmm.
He could tell this is the moment I found out. That moment lives on. I had to get him out of the house. I didn't know if he was violent. I knew he knew. I knew he knew the chips were down, and it's at that moment that psychopaths can be really dangerous. I didn't sleep that night, and the next day I went to the police, and then the whole thing changed from that moment.
Well, that is why it is very important not to reveal to the psychopath or to a narcissist that they're narcissist or psychopath, that you figure them out, because once you figure them out, they're going to be a huge backlash and complete hatred and incredible manipulation for everything that you have left, including children.
Yeah, so narcissistic spectrum, there's the narcissistic personality disordered person, then there's the sociopath, also narcissistic, and then there's the psychopath who's also narcissistic. So they all have narcissism, just to different degrees and slightly different characters. So the commonality is usually with any predator, even just NPDs, they begin the relationship with love bombing. So they will really do their best to make you feel comfortable, tell you you're wonderful, create a comfortable world with the two of you, and there will be like a fake future. And at that point, they're deploying their social face and they're hiding their reality really skillfully. So depending how long they can maintain that two-face, the Jekyll and Hyde, eventually the victim can see this isn't consistent. They begin to question. At one point, the behavior turns. It's called switching. They switch. And that's when the gaslighting starts. And often they will blaming you for doubting them, for not trusting them. All sorts of integration. Then you finally find out you're in real danger, because that's when they realize they've lost their asset, they've lost their target, they've lost their supply. They go into a shame cycle. It's a disintegration of the false self, and you're in real danger at that point. And they will become absolutely rageful. They will be blaming. They will punish. And they do that in many ways. It's emotional abuse. It's physical abuse if you're really unlucky. It's financial abuse. And they will alienate you from everybody. They will get all the family on board with them, and they will start the smear campaign. If you're a parent, they will start what's called the deliberate parental alienation. They will enmesh their children and try to isolate you by getting them on board. And when they've done that, they say, see, you're the perpetrator. I'm the real victim. So it doesn't matter if they're the high status, high earner, powerful leader of the community. Somehow they reframe that as I'm the victim. So I had to do what I had to do, whether that's multiple affairs, whether that's financial abuse, whether it's whatever. The story gets flipped. And so the victim perpetrator gets swapped. And at that point, you can't really fight it. They've set it up so that you've got no assets to fight it. They've set it up so the community's on their side. They've only shown the public social face to those people. Those people will never believe what you've been through. It's white picket fence torture at that point. You've had this public life, and there's several kinds, and they will never believe the private life. There's several kinds of narcissists. Maybe we should map briefly too. There's at least 6. There's a covert narcissist who is always the victim, the sad person.
Vigilant. Mm-hmm.
Covert. But they're just as dangerous. And there's a lot of women like that. So be clear that women too, although not as often. I've had 1 or 2 in business, covert narcissist who can always be the one who is suffering because you're a perpetrator. There's the collective communal narcissist. So those are the ones who can be the head of a nonprofit. They can be a church leader. They can be a cult leader. They are the ones who can gather people. They're very charismatic, pretend to be very social and communal, and have everybody else's interests at heart. Meanwhile, it's all about their own interests, and they're manipulating the crowds. Very charming. I've come across one of those as an enlightenment teacher, for example. gathers lots of students and completely, actually, I would call him a covert, communal, seductive narcissist. So use their sexuality. So there's the sexualized, what we call a somatic narcissist. So that might be the woman on Facebook who is always gathering her supply, the maybe the OnlyFans woman, using their sexuality and their bodies gain the supply. There's the malignant narcissist who would perhaps often end up as a criminal in the justice system. There's the grandiose narcissist who is leading a company and is the first one to keep inventing digital devices, and branding that as himself. Maybe airplanes, for example, like leaders of big companies. Those are more the grandiose, very entitled, really don't recognize anybody in their internal lives, but use them all to build an empire. So we have the whole range here of behaviors, and it's men, women. But the research shows that the higher the testosterone, the more likely they are to be psychopathic. There's a correlation. Definitely more men. And women obviously have been groomed from childhood to be the submissive, and the men have been from childhood to be the entitled operator. So the dynamics of our culture set it up to be mostly codependent women and abusive men. And the testosterone levels show in the incarceration situation, where they've done blood tests on prisoners, that the higher the testosterone, the more likely to be psychopathic. So it is skewed. It's not only men, but it's definitely skewed towards men being predators.
You mentioned, Sally, that at the beginning, all of these types, they are very charming. They use love bombing. And of course, psychopaths, they use it to an extreme, and you can never just discern whether that is the truth or not. And with them, including all the narcissists that love bomb you, at that time of love bombing, you feel as if you're on top of the world.
Yeah.
They idolize you. None of your vices exist. You're the best person in the world. You're the most beautiful one. And this is how you exactly feel. By idealizing you, you feel good. And you get attracted to this kind of a feeling as well.
Yeah, there's definitely addiction plays into it, Yana. You bring up a really good point here of what we call limerence. So the dopamine hits, you become addicted to that good feeling. So it's a brain chemistry that they play into. So once they've set up the brain chemistry, it's really hard to see the reality. You're lost in what we call limerence, the feel-good chemicals, the serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin from being with somebody. It's a powerful drug. So there's loving and the closeness and safety that's cultivated. I had this in business with a woman. So it's not only men. Women can do this culturally. Will praise you, but they're still just going to use you. And then once they're finished with you, they're going to discard you. So it's this process. But it's that addiction of the victim to their own brain chemistry that makes it to see the reality and to leave. And then what happens with the inevitable power dynamic that sets in, it's called a trauma bond. 1 minute you're being praised, and the next minute you're being devalued. And that sets up a chaos. And you become addicted to, oh my God, if I just behave in this way, I'll go back to the limerence. And they will give you limerence for a day, and then they will take the limerence away with the critical behavior, the devaluation, the humiliation. the blame, the emotional abuse, and I had that from women to in this situation with the business. So the part is inevitable, and it's up to the victim at that point to get there safely, and that's very hard because you're broken at that point.
What was important to understand at that time when all of a sudden you realize that there's inconsistency, that he's been so nice and charming, and I've been the best person in the world for him, and all of a sudden I'm not. And you understand that you've been devalued, de-idealized. So what's important here to understand also, Sally, is that we must be able to use the critical factor here and understand that thinking of ourselves as special, as our culture now promotes, or you're special in anything that you do, any way that you behave, you can be a completely different person, and the way that you behave, the way that you look, is completely up to you. Those are just your idiosyncrasies, and you are a special person. Now, when with narcissists and psychopaths, we realize that we are not special, and that was all of a side, we must take it to heart and understand that is not about us. That was meticulously constructed story for us and then against us.
Yeah, Yana, you put your finger on it. So when we look at how does narcissism, and in its extreme psychopathy, and in the middle of sociopathy, it's kind of a spectrum. How does that start? And we need to be educated around this. So it starts, either it's genetic, there's a high propensity of sociopathic or psychopathic dads who give birth to narcissistic, at least, sons and daughters, mostly sons, because of that entitlement and the cultural grooming that's okay for, whereas a girl might pretend modulate that a bit because she's a girl. So it can be subterranean in a woman, but it'll be there. But it's often also from a childhood trauma. We call them adverse first experiences, the ACEs. There's 10 of them. Your viewers can Google what happens in childhood to such a deep trauma that this becomes as adaptive behavior for the child to survive the home. So the ACEs are outlined. Your clients can look at that. But if a child is feeling unsafe in childhood, they will adapt. So narcissistic personality disorder and its worse parts of the spectrum is an adaptation in childhood if it's not genetic. And if it's genetic, it's often both nurture and nature, because if you've got a sociopathic parent, you're going to be raised in dangerous environments. So it's double there. But you can have a psychopath born into a perfectly good home. So this is something we need to be aware of too, that it can be genetic. How that child always feels in danger. So it begins to see the world as a dangerous place to be, and it's stuck in survival mode very early. Never develops out of that. That narcissism is a defense mechanism. It starts to see that it will only survive if it can control its world and manipulate it. The world, including people, just become objects that they can use for their needs, which are safety and survival, which looks like money, power, and sex, and having a relationship that they can control. So it's set up early, either genetically or from early childhood trauma, and it's not fixable. That's my point, is women think, oh, I've got this man, I'm going to fix him because that's what we do. We've been raised to believe that's what women do. It's not fixable. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that if somebody is narcissistic and diagnosable, not just, I mean, everybody's narcissistic, so it's a spectrum. At that point, when you feel it's diagnosable because of all the criteria and the patterns and repetition cycle, get away, because you cannot fix it, not fixable. It's so early on that it's a pattern that's been established.
And of course, as women, we try to fix. And also, there are men also in the position of rescuers. They will try to fix the person, psychopathic, narcissistic, but they are not fixable.
Yeah, and some lovely, kind-hearted men are doing that with women who are abusing them and using them. So it's not, I really want to say that, it's not always men on women, but it's mostly that, unfortunately.
You mentioned one profound thought, that we mainly believe that evil doesn't exist, or we prefer to believe. And also, our society is also telling us that evil per se does not exist, and we are denied um, the depiction of true events in the world from the horror sides. If we go to church, a church doesn't want to talk about the evil that exists in this world, or there is the opposite force to God that is going to create havoc in your life. They prefer to hide it. Because, as I was told when I went to church, they said if we don't talk about evil, then it doesn't come to our lives. And that doctrine is taught to people, to good-hearted people, and they prefer not to think about it. They prefer to live in that bubble. So when the danger comes, they've been so bubbleized and living in that bubbled environment, in the cage in their heads, and also social cages. So they cannot expect, and they're severely traumatized. Even those that deal with psychopaths deal or work with the narcissists or victims with of narcissistic abuse, like myself. I cannot immediately figure out that there's a narcissist in front of me or psychopath, because it doesn't matter how much we are trained, how well we're trained. Psychopath will find its way to charm you, to deceive you, at least at the very beginning. And it takes time for you to figure it out, to put your finger on it.
Yeah, this something is interesting to me is the notion of projection. So I thought early on in my life, projection is when your show you blame on somebody else. I thought that was projection, but I've subsequently realized that projection can also be of your own goodness. It's not only your shadow. So if you're a good-hearted person and you were groomed as a child in a strict family that had strong values, you went to church, they told you to be a good person, to forgive, to always see the best in people, give them the benefit of the doubt, you're going to project that onto the world too. It's your goodness. So you can't see the shadow. That's putting people in danger. And I really do think we need education around this huge thing. And thank you, Yana, for doing this, because this is part of the work we need to do is to, especially women, educate them around the signs of we would call psychopathy, and how to recognize the patterns, how to have boundaries, give time to any relationship before you give your heart or even your body. Because as soon as you give your body, there's limerence. So there's a lot of validity in saying wait to have an intimate relationship. Wait, because as soon as women are making love, their brain chemistry is heightened, and then they can't see. So, and the projection of our own goodness, we have to see the signs. And so this book that I'm writing is called Making Love to Evil. And I use that on purpose because I've been taught to love people. And so I was never taught how to see people in their depth in their shadow, how I was being used, because I didn't think evil existed. I was taught is perhaps out there, and it's definitely not a devil or like a split between God and devil. It's out there somewhere, but if you're a good person, you'll never encounter it. That's just simply not true. It crept into my life in several forms. I couldn't see it. Was never taught to recognize it. I certainly wasn't taught how to deal with it. And I had to teach myself. And basically, if you don't, you can be in danger from 6% of the male population if you're a woman, and 20% of your bosses and professional leaders and politicians. We vote for psychopaths. How does that happen? We haven't been taught.
I think it is absolutely important for parents, even of younger children, to watch and educate themselves about the signs of psychopathy and evil per se in the world, because the children, if they're shielded from any problems at home or anything that they should overcome in order to understand that evil does exist, children grow up, they finish high school, and then they go into the world thinking that life is good. People are inherently good, when it is not the case. We're not taught that at school. Neither do we teach our children at home. But it's important not to shield them and give them enough exposure to the evil in this world that they learn how to overcome it.
Yeah. So how I define evil now, we've had to think about this quite a lot. Is it's not a sort of an animal with cloven hooves and a trident with horns. It's not a devil. What evil is to me is a human that is literally born with an incapacity to feel or have a conscience, and which will turn its world into an object to be used for its own survival, and literally has no remorse or feelings. So that's a different way to look at evil. It's a human. It's not something we've split off and turned into an archetype. It's a human that walks the streets and will choose deliberately vulnerable people and beautiful women and people assets and skills. I mean, I know I've been used before by business people for my skills. You get used for anything. Supply people. Could be attention, like we need you in my audience. I want to build my audience. You're best for your attention. I need your money, so I'm going to grift my way into your purse. I need your body and sexuality. I need your love and affection because I'm very wounded and you can fix me. I need the status you can give me, whether through a marriage or a relationship. You are used for all sorts of supply by what we would call a psychopath. And to me, that is the nature of evil, is the inability of these people to see that you are a real three-dimensional person with sentience and feelings, and that there's a consequence to their behavior. They don't get that. All they feel is their own pain and their own needs, and the boundary around that. They literally can't empathize with your experience. So narcissism is that kind of rigidity between you and the world, and you cannot feel beyond that. You can only feel in that boundary. Me, my experience, my survival, that is the priority, and everything else doesn't matter. That's evil.
I cannot emphasize enough that early on in our life, we have to educate ourselves and not shield ourselves from evil. I know that because we get into life situations with good faith, as good human beings, with our nature, we want to be good. We're expected also to behave socially nice in the social situations. And that means not to offend anybody, especially nowadays when you can offend just anybody and you have to be talking kind of defensively every single time to correct yourself, essentially walking around with a disclaimer. Uh, we are not prepared.
Yes, you and I were having a little chat earlier, Yana, and much of this result being in close proximity to a psychopath is the victim ends up with a lot of trauma, physical trauma, and if it's invisible, so that's never taken into account on the victim statement. You can't go to a judge and say, well, I now have autoimmune disease, or I have a problem with my gut, or I can't sleep, or those things don't, the legal system doesn't care about them. They're not measurable. So there's a lot of trauma that nobody ever accounts for that's caused by a psychopath. But the one that's beginning to be accounted for in some circles is what's called betrayal trauma. So you believed in this person. You believed in the construction that they had about their character, which is often fake. You believed in the future you had together. You believed and trusted in the mutual project they were trying to get you onto so they could deceive you. You believed. Betrayal trauma is the severing of the trust in people and the universe. That takes decades, maybe to recover. So that's one of the invisible costs that, for example, you can't even put on a victim, so the judge will never take that into account. Basically, as far as the judge is concerned, if it goes to court, you lost a certain amount of money. Tough shit. It's not illegal to lie, and so you lost. And so that's the full extent of what he's going to give the sentence on. Well, these lovely female lawyers and judges are beginning to change that now. So this is what I'd love to emphasize, is how women are going to save women. We can't rely on men to do this for us legally, because they don't see our story. They don't even see us as traumatized beings, because that's not one of the metrics. They just metrics, judges, when they're looking at cause and effect. So, but women are becoming to realize, and the prosecutor that I'm working with is my psychopath. Isn't that funny? My psychopath has traumatized a few women since me, and he's in and out of prison. Now on trial again, and this prosecutor asked me to go testify again, which I'm willing to do to help other women. We have to change the legal system that's not recognizing female experience. This beautiful prosecutor is trying to get the law changed. So I want to reassure your listeners that there's work being done by women in the legal system. So somebody who is an economic predator and a romance fraud, he can be caught and he can be tried and get a sentence, and it's usually minimal, because judges mainly think, well, stupid woman, you had it coming. So they get, like, I don't know, 15 months, 18 months. My predator got 18 months. Then this prosecutor is bringing to the forefront with the new trial that we need to get this change. If that serial economic predator does it again, he's then put on a list, as are pedophiles. So it's a repeat offender list. So that prosecutor prove a number of things. She has to prove that this man is not ever redeemable, that he cannot learn better behavior, that there's an innate pattern that he will keep doing it. And that's a lot of work for her. She has to do that in the justice system, in the trial. And then if that is proven, he gets put on the repeat offender list, so that any woman can have access to that information online. That is absolutely brilliant. And that is being brought forward by women to protect women. And this lovely young prosecutor, she's so amazing, is trying to change the whole system. I'm in Canada, so this might not pertain to the US yet, but it will come. So repeat romance fraudsters and economic predators will be put on a list available publicly to other women, like any pedophile. You will have him in your area and you will know not to date him. The weird thing is, though, they use multiple names, so it's not guaranteed, because they can change names and construct new identities. So we still have to be super careful.
There is a Netflix series, Tinder Swindler. I don't know if anybody watched it, but they should definitely. Any person who is in a dating pool have to watch it and understand the signs how women can be defrauded. Many of those women, they lost their money. And of course, he would be directly asking them for money, but there are those who are so charming and like yours, and that they figured it all out, that getting money indirectly is a better way probably to defraud people and not be caught.
Yeah, some lovely movies, Yana. Please.
Oh, very lovely. Oh, so lovely. There is one, that Catch Me If You Can, the older one, of course. And like you mentioned, the Dirty John, and the new one, like Lively, It Ends With Us. I'm intending to watch it.
I think the best way to educate women is to make movies. We need to see more of these movies. We need to understand the cunning and the charm and the lack of by the cleverest ones, so that you never actually feel in danger. That's how they get you in danger. If you felt in danger, you would just have your boundary up and say no. So they rely on you feeling safe. It's just so unbelievable how they do this. So they emulate empathy, kindness, support. They meet your needs because they're reading them all the time. They're reading you without you knowing. They fulfill your needs. They get you on board. They manipulate and strategize, and they're cunningly planning. Where's your weak point? Where are you vulnerable? Because they're going to get you. So the more movies about this, the better. And we need to really understand this.
And also to have our self-esteem up to the level that we don't immediately fall for this charming personality and feeling special. If we didn't feel special anyplace else with other people, and all of a sudden this predator comes and makes us feel so special, the chances are we're not, and it is okay.
Yeah, so they get us on a couple of vulnerabilities through the love bombing, making you feel special. They get you up you're lonely. So we're very vulnerable if we're feeling alone. They get you through knowing that you won't tell the story because of shame. That's the big one, is I'm going to stay silent because it's too embarrassing to tell people what happened. So shame, they bank on you being ashamed. You will never tell the story because you'll be implicated. So we have to get over the shame and understand that that this can happen to anybody, and it does. It happens to the smartest people.
It does.
Yep.
It's very sad. But nevertheless, we have to equip ourselves with knowledge and tell our stories.
I think so, Yana. I think in this work you're doing sharing stories is so important, and that movies are so effective. This culture, you know, you're lying back on a Friday night and you watch the story, and it happens to someone else, but then you begin to connect that with your own life, and that's such a democratic way to educate the public. And so I'm grateful to Net, for example, because Hollywood never have touched these stories. Hollywood is full of narcissistic abuse. So why would they tell on themselves? So Netflix started telling stories for the masses, and I'm grateful for that. They're telling the marginalized. They're talking about all sorts of identities. They're bringing forth stories with shame-free storytelling. I'm grateful for that.
And I'm grateful for you to come and tell your story because it does have a cathartic effect on women who are in a similar situation, who were, are, or will be perhaps. It would be like a warning story for them. So thank you for sharing. I know that it is not easy at all to come and share what came from the past without some sort of dissociation. So I thank you for it.
Thank you, Yana. It's been a while, 13 years for me, so I was deeply involved in my healing, and I feel much better about it now. Now I can talk about it factually. I wasn't always this calm about it. So
Oh, yes. And it's also important for viewers and listeners to understand that while we are speaking about this in a composed manner, we were a mess before,
yeah,
just like everyone who goes through this experience.
yeah, and there may be evidence of me having betrayal trauma for the rest of my life. So it's ongoing, actually. And how I heal that is to testify at the trials, to speak about it, to be shame-free. So that's how I work on it now.
To tell our stories.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope that you continue to do this work on yourself in a pleasant, beautiful, and blessed manner. Thank you.
Thanks, Yana.
Well, we were live on Be Honest with Dr. Yana, and Sally was very honest with me about her experience. So join us next week on Friday at noon Pacific time, as usual, for another story, for another experience that can be beautiful or can be heart-wrenching. So come and join us. Thank you for joining us today and listening. We will see you next week. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, Sally. Bye-bye.